And I was repelling people with this anger. I was repelling my children. I was repelling my family. I was repelling people in public, friends. They were just waiting for the next flash, and they were just being very cautious about that. I wasn't endearing people, having them come toward me. And
are you tired of letting anger and negativity control your life?
Today we are joined by Paul Zolman, the author of Role of Love.
Paul takes us on a candid journey from a childhood marred by anger to a life filled with love and purpose.
He shares how his innovative game harnesses the 5 love languages to help you focus on the best in others and create stronger, more meaningful relationships.
Stay with us until the end because Paul's final piece of advice could be the spark you need to start rewriting your story. Let's dive in. Welcome to Rewrite Your Story, the podcast where change begins with you.
We're your hosts, Stephen and Sharlene.
As professional coaches and mentors trained in various modalities, we have helped hundreds of people
Bridge the gap between the person they are
and the person they want to be.
We bring you conversations with real people who have overcome real setbacks.
You will walk away with practical steps to find more clarity, alignment, and success in any area you want to improve.
So join us and discover how you have the power to overcome, to change, and to rewrite your story.
So pick up the pen. Your new chapter starts now.
We are super excited. We have Paul Zolman from St. George, Utah. So welcome to our show, Paul.
Welcome.
thank you, Stephen and Sharlene. I'm so excited to be here.
Now, Paul, you are the author of The Role of Love, the application of love in our everyday life. But before we go in there, why don't you tell us a bit about your background and how you rewrote your story?
That's a great question, Stephen. Thank you for that. I'm actually grew up in an angry family. And what that angry culture looks like is that there's a lot of abuse, all kinds of abuse. There's verbal abuse, there's social, there's emotional, there's physical, there's sexual. There's just all kinds of abuse within that angry type of culture. That angry type of culture also doesn't have any boundaries. They'll talk over one another, thinking what I have to say is a whole lot more important than what you have to say. Therefore, I'm going to talk while you're talking. Nobody gets hurt. That's the angry culture. And so that's kind of the background that I grew up in. And I thought all along that, you know what, there's really got to be a better way. And I remember my first grade teacher, Mrs. Rogers. She was probably very close to retirement. At least it appeared that way. Maybe she was in her 60s or something like that. Very old compared to a 6-year-old, 10 times my age. But she was just the kindest person ever. And I just absolutely loved going to school. That love of going to school actually helped me thrive in school, that I wanted to do whatever they asked me to do. And I also developed that attitude at home that I wanted to do whatever I was supposed to do so I would not get in trouble. So I would not get seriously beaten or get spanked severely. At age 17, I made the declaration that any 17 or 18-year-old makes about their parents. I'm not going to raise my children like that. And everybody makes those declarations. They said, my life is going to be different. I'm going to have a more perfect life. And then we fall back in some of those traps that our parents had. And such it was for me. I learned from my parents how to be annoyed, stack these annoyances one on top of another until I had a flash of anger. That was the pattern that my father had. And I acquired that pattern as well. And I was thinking just as hard as I could, how do I break out of that? How do you rewrite that portion of your life so that you can have a different pattern that you pass on to your children? And so that's my story, that I was able to figure out find something that worked a little bit better.
So, Paul, obviously there was an accumulation of events that brought you to that one place where I have to figure this out and find out how to do this better. Was there an actual trigger event that occurred, or was it just the accumulation?
I think there were several trigger events that kept moving me. It's like just one little adjustment. If you make a big adjustment in life, it's almost so frightening that you'll want to go back and fall back into what you're familiar with before. So slight adjustments are the very best kind of adjustments that you can make. And there were slight adjustments along the way. One slight adjustment that was pretty profound, that I remember it distinctly, was I was about 35 years old, And I realized that, oh, I've been blaming my father for for that stacking of annoyances, for the flashing of anger, for the disruptive social behavior that I had. It would happen in public, it would happen at private. I couldn't determine which straw it would be that would break that camel's back and cause that flash of anger. Because I was stacking. After I'd had the flash of anger, I'd go back down and I'd start stacking again. It was just cyclic in that way. So realization at age 35 that I'm responsible for my own behavior was really a profound realization. My father had passed away 7 years earlier, and I was thinking, that's really sad that I feel like I can still blame him, even though he's not around to defend himself. He's not around to talk this out. He's not even around to be able to defend himself in that way. So I thought, I got to start being responsible. And I realized at that point that I don't want to be angry. And coming from a negative background, that's really kind of a double negative statement. And double negatives only work in math, as far as I know. You multiply two negative numbers together, that makes a positive number. It doesn't work in relationships. And I was finding that out. It wasn't working in relationships. And I was repelling people with this anger. I was repelling my children, my family, people in public, friends. They were just waiting for the next flash. And they were just being very cautious about that. I wasn't endearing people, having them come toward me and having them look to me for an advisor or anything like that. I was repelling people. I didn't want to do that.
Wow. So what would you say was maybe the catalyst for you to realize, hey, I know what I need to do to change now?
I really didn't know what the catalyst was because of the knowledge base I had given to me from my parents. I didn't know what it would take to do it, but it was just kind of stumbling through things. And it really came to a head when, after 23 and a half years of marriage for me, the marriage dissolved. And part of the reason I own some culpability there, that those angry flashes were part of the reason why the marriage came to a demise. So here I am, single. My wife and I had 8 children. There were 5 left in the home. I became the primary custodian of the 5 remaining children. Stephen, I see you smiling there. We only had 8. My grandfather had 19, and I'm number 10 of 11. So these generations, they're scaling down. My children only have 3, Stephen and Sharlene. I want more grandchildren. What is the problem here? Why can't I get more grandchildren? So as I've got these 5 children in my custody, on the weekends off, what would happen was that where she had my ex-wife had the children in her custody, I would do what I call destination dating. I would pick a city or pick a person that lived in a different city. We'd agree on a meeting place, a meeting city, and we'd have a destination date. And then we go back home. And I did that for about a year and a half, and I traveled all over the United States and into Mexico a little bit. Went to Daytona Beach, Florida, and Jacksonville, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, and Columbia, South Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, New York City, Kansas City, Salt Lake City, Nashville, Phoenix, Las Vegas, Cabo San Lucas, and many more cities I went to having these destinations day. I was having this wonderful midlife crisis that everybody should have. I highly recommend it. It was really a lot of fun, but I wasn't finding love. I was looking for love in all the wrong places. Well, after all this is over, about 3.5 years after the divorce, my ex-wife decides now she wants primary custody of the last 3 children. And her plan was to move in with her parents. I, as number 10 of 11 children, never knew my grandfathers at all. And I barely knew my grandmothers. They lived approximately 7 hours east and then 7 hours west for each one of the grandmothers. So we really didn't live close to the grandparents. I thought, this is really a very nice thing to get these last 3 children get to know their grandparents. So I relinquished primary custody to my ex-wife for those last 3 children that were at the home. Now I'm all alone. While I'm all alone, my older sister calls me up. She said, I have a neighbor that I want to introduce to you. I said, sis, you know what? I've been doing this destination dating for a year and a half, finding nothing. I don't want to do it. And you when you're number 10 of 11, you have to do what your older siblings say. In the day, I was the human remote control. If they wanted the channel change, I had shorter legs. I could make it to the TV a lot faster. I had to go change the channel, walk up to the TV, turn the knob to the channel that they wanted to watch. That was a human remote control. You have to do what older brothers and sisters say. And I only had that one older sister. All the rest were brothers and one younger sister. So I'm kind of the thorn between two roses. I said, I don't want to do this. She says, oh, come on. I said, okay, I will email her. What kind of relationship can you expect to develop while you're doing an email? I didn't expect anything, but she was a really good writer. And so after about 4 or 5 interchanges like that, I decided I would be brave. And I was going to ask a deep, deep question. How many times have you been married? And she writes back and says, counting the 5 that are buried in the backyard. And I howled with laughter. I thought, I've got a live wire here. Somebody that has personality. Somebody that has a real sense of humor. So I wanted to pursue this a little bit better, even like my sister said. So we started communicating a little bit more. And finally, I moved up to where my sister was at. That's in the St. George area. And we became more serious. Now it's time for Big Brother approval. So this epiphany happened at that Big Brother approval. I take her in, and it's 300 miles north, in Salt Lake City, actually, 300 miles north of where I live. We go in. The first thing that happens is my sister-in-law pulls her aside and says, the only emotion that the Zolman family learned growing up is anger. At first, I did not. I said, then it made me mad. I thought, I've been busted. I just verified exactly what she said. And I thought, boy, if there's a time for a change in life, a time to rewrite your story, now it's the time. So I started reading the Color Code, and I started reading the 5 Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman. And I really liked the principles of the 5 Love Languages. But from where I came from, I could not get it. You mean if I guess what your love language is and then I cater to that, you're going to call that love and we're going to be buddies? Yeah, I could agree that we're going to be buddies, but I'm a terrible guesser. It hasn't worked for me up until this time. Why do you think it'll work right now? So the second thing that Dr. Chapman has in his book is, well, if I take this survey, I can find out what my love language is. Well, what the heck am I supposed to do with that, Dr. Chapman? Advertise? I could get a little button that says, hello, I'm Gifts. Put my little Venmo QR code on there. Gifts, what do you have for me today? Here's my Venmo. Send the money. I just love money. That's awkward. I was done with awkward. I'd already had this stacking effect and had these awkward moments, these flashes of anger. I didn't want to do that anymore. But I thought back to my childhood, and I remember, even as dysfunctional as our family was, that playing games brought our family together. Yeah, there was still all that smack talk. There was still all the put downs. There was still very aggressive competition, but our family was together. And it felt good to be together. I thought, what if I could make this a game? So I contacted Dr. Chapman and asked Dr. Chapman, are you licensing those little pictures, those little icons that you have for the love languages? After a couple of weeks, his attorney wrote back and said, no, we're not doing that. So I talked to an attorney in my neighborhood that was a friend. He's a copyright attorney, intellectual property attorney. And he said that theory, like the love language theory, is not copyrightable. Application is. So they weren't doing it as a game. So I created it as a game and made my own icons. And I created it into a cube. So here I'm holding the cube for your listeners that aren't seeing what we're doing right here. This side of the cube, they all have pictures on it, no words at all. But this side of the cube has 2 hands together forming a heart. Very familiar thing that people are doing nowadays. But this particular heart has a conversation flyout from it. That conversation flyout means the words of the heart. That would be the words for the love language of words. Those are the compliments. Those are people saying, I love you. That's what the words are all about. The next one is a hand holding an hourglass. This represents the love language of time. Just spending time with someone. My wife loves to watch Korean dramas, and they're really good, but they're kind of slow. They're mostly romantic. They don't even kiss until like episode number 9 or 10 and of a 12 episode thing. And it's just really kind of slow moving. but it's so clean and so beautiful. It's really kind of a great romantic way to watch and spend time with my wife. We don't even talk. We just watch and read the captions. You can't talk while you're reading the captions, so we just watch it and we spend time together. The next one I'm holding looks like a server in a restaurant holding a platter. This would represent service. These are people that like service, like their car washed. They like the carpet vacuum. They like the trash taken out. They like help with the laundry. They like things like that. They like to be served in that way. What that does for them is light them up. They really like that, and it makes them have a better day. You'll notice that most of these are hands stretched out. And the reason for them to be hands stretched out like this is that it's giving it away. You're giving love away. And that's the whole idea of this game, is to give it away. This icon that I'm showing right now is two hands, looks like they're holding hands, and it represents touch. And the last one is a hand holding a gift, represents gifts. 5 love languages, 6 sides on the cube. The last one I've created is a hand holding a question mark. That's a question mark, is surprise me. So I named this side surprise me. Just 2 instructions, Stephen and Sharlene. Roll the cube every day, once a day, roll it first thing in the morning. Whatever it lands on, that's the love language you practice giving away all day that day. All day to everybody. I was single at the time I created this, and I said, Dr. Chapman, who in the heck am I supposed to love? You say you're supposed to have a significant other? Not everybody has a significant other. And I was one of those people that did not. So I'm single. What am I supposed to do? Oh, I just looked around and I said, well, I just have to love everybody, I guess. Wow, that's a little bit more heavy than having a significant other. I have to love everybody? Oh, it was perfect for me. I was looking for that replacement behavior of that stacking effect of being annoyed at what other people were doing. Hardly ever was annoyed at myself. Well, there was one time that I was so annoyed at myself that I didn't talk to myself for 3 days. This really changed my life, Stephen and Sharlene. This is what was the impetus for changing my life. No longer was I looking at what's wrong with somebody and looking at maybe the 10 to 20% of the faults or the mistakes of another. I was looking now at the 80 to 90% of that person and the good that they had in that person, trying to talk about that good, focusing on that. And I became so busy doing that, I forgot to be annoyed. I forgot to get mad. I forgot to stack, and have those angry fits. It changed my life. Instead of looking at what's bad about a person, look what's good about a person. What can you love about that person? It was monumental.
So, Paul, what you're saying is rolling a dice changed the way you saw people, and therefore the anger was no longer compounding.
That's pretty close to Stephen. Rolling the die actually set the theme for the day, a theme of how am I going to act today? How am I going to love all day today? That's what really changed my life. So really following that theme of that random roll of the die, and it's all love is on every side of the die. It was a decision to love all day long, every day, and all people. What I'm watching for as I'm doing that is I'm watching for people to light up. When they light up, I've discovered their primary love language. You don't have to do that anymore.
So, well, what were probably some of the hardest challenges having found this? Like, did you come across any challenges while you were doing this process?
Well, I think the biggest challenge, that's a great question, Sharlene. The biggest challenge that I faced is being able to read what they were and try to figure out what their love language was. But as soon as I realized that when they light up, that's the discovery. That's what it was. And so for that person, what I did was just make a mental note. That's what they like. So wash, rinse, repeat for that person, or just find out, well, maybe they might like something else too. It's going to be different every single day. And it's no longer, are you putting people in a box, Sharlene? You're not putting people in a box anymore. That a survey would put you in a box. I'm going to feed you tacos every day for the rest of your life, just because I love you in that way. And I know you love tacos. I'm going to give love to you in that way. Provide the variety. It's the spice of life. This helps you do that.
Yeah. And Paul, that's really interesting that you're saying that, because I definitely, we've both read the book, The Love Languages, and we both know what our love languages our primary love languages are. But is there such thing as a primary love language, or can a person receive love in all of those 5 ways?
Great question, Stephen. I'm absolutely in agreement with Dr. Chap's assessment that everybody has a primary love language and maybe a secondary love language. This is the way they specifically like to be loved most of all. But a lot of people have that smattering of, well, on Christmas, I want a gift. On my birthday, I want a gift. I don't care if I'm physical touch. I want a gift. And it's just, they have these seasons of change that they just want other things. And I think that as we practice that season of change for everyone, we'll have that understanding. We'll know what lights them up that particular day. So as I'm practicing this over a 30-day period, I become well-versed in all 5 love languages. There aren't very many people out there that are versed in all love languages to be able to give it away or even to see it when it comes their way. What this tries to do is close that communication gap that's out there that says, well, Stephen's physical touch and Sharlene is spending time together and they're not connecting. It's like ships passing in the night. This changes that. It gives you that peripheral vision. You say, oh, they're loving on me. It's not my primary love language, but I can see they're making an effort to love me. They're sending love in the way that they like to be loved or the way they like to send the love. I can respond to that now. Because I see it, I can see they're trying, I can respond to that. With only a primary love language, Stephen, you have a hard time doing that. And what it does is that people with a primary love language, as Dr. Chapman had assessed, like to give that away in expectation that it's coming right back to them. It doesn't happen very often. But to me, that's a transaction. Love is not reality show. This isn't let's make a deal. It's not like that. You send the love out without any expectation of it ever coming back, but trusting the laws of the universe that were established long before you and I were ever born. Some people call it the law of the harvest, or karma, or the law of attraction. It all says pretty much the same thing, that whatever you send out will come back someday. What you're watching for when you're doing this, sending love out, which is in your control, and watching how you receive it, that's totally in your control. You can't bid love to come your way. You can't do it. Even if you tell somebody, it's almost making them duty bound. I told you how to love me. How come you're not doing it? And you get to that whiny voice that it just doesn't work. This is different, that you're sending it out without any regard to it coming back, trusting the laws of the universe. It will come back. But the greatest piece that happens is that when you light people up, you've made their day. There's great satisfaction in making people have a better day. There's no satisfaction, zero satisfaction. In fact, great regrets of making people miserable and making them have a miserable day.
Yeah,
This is so good.
absolutely. Paul, you mentioned before that what you usually do when you're rolling the dice and like you're actually looking to see if people light up. What do you do when you're practicing a gift of love, but they don't light up?
You move on. You find somebody that lights up that day. You don't spend a lot of time. It's a great question, Sharlene, but you don't spend a lot of time with people that don't respond to love that you're sending out. You know that you're sending love out. You know that you're doing practices that should light people up in that genre for that particular day. And if they're not lighting up, maybe they'll light up tomorrow. Maybe it's like when I was raising 8 children, we cook one meal. We don't cook. We're not a short order cook at a restaurant. And the answer to, I don't like this, the answer to that was, well, maybe you'll like next meal a little bit better. And it just kind of motivated them to, well, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to eat today. And they'll figure out what it is that they like. And they wouldn't have to eat. We wouldn't force them to eat their meal if they didn't like it. That maybe they'll like the next meal better.
Paul, I've got so many questions for you. The first one is, in your working with the love language and having 8 children, obviously all 8 children, you raise them up the same or in the same environment. Does culture, does household, does that affect your love language and what you become? For instance, I'm going back to me, my love language is acts of service. And I really believe acts of service is because I grew up in a household where everything was done, everything was provided, but love wasn't very touchy-feely or demonstrated. Charlene's love language is quality time. And that comes back to her dad, because her dad would spend so many hours and they would just converse, chat. He would read to her. He would spend a lot of time with her. Am I right in assuming upbringing has something to do with how we interpret love?
That's a great question, and it does. It really does have a way that you interpret love. For example, in my household growing up, the angry household, if you weren't being hit, you didn't feel like you were loved. So physical touch absolutely became that it rose to the top when I took the survey. Put me in that physical touch box because I didn't know anything else. And I think that as you develop your knowledge base of the different love languages, it's going to shift on you a little bit. That you'll like giving away. It may be very uncomfortable because you're out of your box. You're out of that service mode of sending it out or receiving it. You're out of that mode when you're doing the other love languages. And so I think that you can have that shift, but the cultural impact of what you were raised with really absolutely has an impact even into your adult life. But I think that you can alter that a little bit, as I said, as you learn the different love languages and learn how to give it away and give it away appropriately and give it away in a genuine sense that you really care about these people. If you're going to spend time with someone, especially if you rolled time on a day, Stephen, that you needed service, there's a lot of ways that you can send time out or set aside some time and be of service to someone else by doing that. If sending service out is what you like to do, that's one thing. I found for me, there's conflict there that I like to receive something different than what I like to give out. And it's just made my life a little bit more complicated because now I have a more rounded feel for all the love languages. And I think you can mold that with any culture, wherever you have come from, as you learn all 5 love languages to give it away and be able to see it when it comes your way. You're going to have that realization come to you that, I really like just giving my wife a hug. I really like that. I just like just doing that 8-second hug just to let her know that I'm here for you, that I want to be with you. I want to spend that time and make it an 8-second hug because that for Sharlene is going to be spending time with her. That is really what she might like just as well as anything else. But you wouldn't do that to an associate at a work or at a job. You might create a high five or a fist bump, or for that person at work, create a specific handshake that has 10 steps to it. Something that's just between you and that other person for physical touch. There's a lot of ways that you can appropriately send the other love languages out and just become well versed with it. It's going to just expand that communication for you and just may alter your culture just a little bit just because the knowledge base. And that for me, that's education was key to that life-changing, rewriting my story. My father had an 8th grade education. My mother had a 12th grade high school education. I graduated from college. I was one of the first in my family. I had an older brother that graduated. And then after I did, then I had another brother and then I had another sister. And all my children have graduated from college now. So having that education piece, having for the love languages, really could change your culture and alter it for generations. I wanted that in my life. I needed that in my life. I didn't want to have angry children. I didn't want to pass that on. I wanted to have a legacy of love. So I had to rewrite my story.
Paul, you mentioned something and it's just got me thinking. As a child, you were spanked and hit, and that developed to your love language because you felt love in that moment, and now your love language being touch. How did you heal that? Because you received it in such a violent way, if we can say that, but now you're receiving it in a loving way. You must have had to bring some healing into that area.
And let me explain it this way. Have you ever had anybody say, well, I'm just being critical of you because I love you. I want you to improve. You ever heard somebody say that to you?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah.
And does it feel like love? No,
No.
it doesn't, and it doesn't come across that way either. And I was easily able to distinguish that type of physical touch is not appropriate. In fact, I was testing this cube with a family of 5 children, and the youngest was 4 years old. One day he rolled physical touch, and he's jumping up and down and pumping his fists and says, "Yes, physical touch, physical touch." Immediately, he goes and beats up on his brothers. He thought it was permission for him to be able to beat up on his brothers. Like he knew it was not the right thing to do before that time. Now he had permission. Yes, a permission. And his mother, trying to suppress all the laughter, said, "No, son, this would be appropriate physical touch. The high five, the fist bump, or you could even hug your brothers. That's appropriate physical touch." So what it became was a teaching moment for not only that 4-year-old, but for all the siblings that were in the room listening to that outburst of, yes, physical touch. So, yeah, it was easy to distinguish the difference.
I love that analogy.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what like you bring this to schools? Like, what benefit would a school have for implementing this system?
So, as I've taken it to schools and we're testing it in schools right now, what they do is they take the 2 seconds or less to roll the cube at the beginning of the day. The teacher might take 30 to 45 seconds to explain what class, this is what behavior we're watching for today. These are the type of things that you could do today within that behavior that would be appropriate. And so she's trying to set the stage for the day. At the end of the day, now the kids are getting surprised because now they have to write about it. So they're recording what they rolled, opportunities they saw to love in that way, what they did about those opportunities. It actually is a reporting system. Now the kids have to be responsible. Now that 6-year-old or 7-year-old has to be responsible for their own actions. What a godsend. I had to wait and let it happen for myself at age 35. Now they can get it, in 1/6 of the time.
Yeah.
The other thing that
Awesome.
does for that is that it becomes a journal. I would have loved to have a journal from my first grade. That loving first grade teacher, Mrs. Rogers, that I remember so well, would have loved to have a journal. Why did I love her so much? What was it about the day in her classroom that I loved so much? 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road, I would have loved to have shared that with my own children. Now they've got a love journal. Those astute parents will put those in chronological order, maybe bind it for the child at the end of that school year. Now you've got a first grade or a third grade journal. You've got something tangible that taught that child how to express the love languages. And now what you've got is you're stacking kindness on top of kindness, on top of kindness, on top of kindness. What that does for you with these love languages, which I consider very basic, what that does is take you to the higher laws of love, the law of charity, the law of compassion. When you're an adult, it'll take you a law of intimacy or forgiveness or mercy or sympathy or empathy. These are all higher laws of love. How do you get there? You use these basic love languages as stair steps to get there, stacking kindness on kindness. How would it look if somebody insult you, and then now they're asking for forgiveness? It doesn't work. It's kindness on kindness on kindness, then asking for forgiveness.
Yeah.
I love that stacking. Yeah.
I love it.
Paul, what are some things that people can discover when reading your book and or playing your game?
Just the 3 products right now, Stephen. So what the expectation is that they'll hopefully refine their loving skills. That's really kind of what we're looking for. Whether they have to write it at the end of the day, in that classroom, the kids, I've talked with teachers all around the world, and every teacher, just 100% of the teachers say this. The last 10 to 15 minutes of the day is really non-productive time. The kids have been there all day. They're tired. They're antsy. They know the bell's going to ring. They're ready to go. Their minds are mush. So that's a good time for a decompression activity. Decompression activity would be writing the journal. That's one of the benefits that you'll see from writing a journal. If you get stressed out during the middle of the day, writing in a journal at the end of a day really is a decompression activity that could help you sleep a better sleep at night. The second thing is that by rolling the die every single day, it's going to help you focus on what's right about people. The media in today focuses on all the negative things that are happening in the world today. Maybe there might be 10% or 5% of that newscast that might be positive. Most of the newscasts, they kind of are conditioning us, so to speak, to be negative and look for the negative in other people. What this rolling the die and what the expectation is that now you're watching for what's right about people. Look for the good in the world. There is so much good out there, so much more good than there is evil. Then let's focus on that. Let's focus on the 80 to 90% of the people of that person that is really good. Even if they're 60% good, they're mostly good. Focus on that larger part instead of focusing on weaknesses that everybody has. Focus on those strengths. It's like a magnifying glass. Whatever you magnify is going to get larger. Who wants the weaknesses of another to be larger? And when you send out criticism of a person's weakness, guess what? That's a boomerang. And I know you have boomerangs down there. That boomerang's going to come back at you with a huge velocity because as you throw it up, it's coming down a lot faster than you threw it up. That could be very dangerous for you. Why would you want to send something negative out like that and have it come back 10 times worse right back to you? And people have focused now on your weaknesses rather than your strengths. We've got to turn that around. That's an expectation that they can have. The book is kind of a step-by-step way that you can do this and discover what other people's love language is without them ever having to take a survey about it.
Before we go on to our final questions, how do you see, if everyone was to get the die and practice one a day, how do you see the world? How would it change the world?
I love that question because we're really looking for people right now that want to change themselves. This is what I wanted. I wanted more than anything to break away from that angry culture. And the angry culture, part of that breakaway for me, Stephen, was that I realized if I could put an adjective and describe what my behavior was at that particular time, then I had an opportunity to move away from that behavior and consider what the opposite behavior would be and then move toward that opposite behavior. For example, let me take the word sarcastic or sarcasm. If I'm sarcastic, is it on the angry side of the spectrum or is it on the loving side of the spectrum? I really kind of categorize it on the angry side of the spectrum because when you consider the opposite for me would be that genuine person, be authentic, be true. And when you put sarcasm against side by side with those attributes, everybody would want to be authentic. Everybody would want to be genuine. And I think that is something that they'll move forward to, something that they can do, and something that they can plan on having that change in their life. And it's just something that I think the world needs. We can do that individually. I can't change you, Stephen. It's an individual thing that has to happen. We can change ourselves. We go around, and I was going around thinking I had control over that person. Why is it doing it so wrong? And as long as I thought that I had control, I was getting annoyed and having those flashes of anger. And it was such a relief to think, I don't have to be in charge of that person anymore. I'm not responsible in that way of their choices that they make. And who would want to be? I can't be right by their side and make their choices for them. It would be so resentful. They would resent that. We can make choices for ourselves. That's the best way it's going to happen. We make choices for ourselves. Hopefully it'll spill over into the family, into the neighborhood, into the community, into the state, the nation, and the world. That's how it has to happen, Stephen. It can't happen any other way. These people that want to change are the ones that we're looking for. We can help them. Here's a tool.
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely. Paul, what advice would you give to someone who wanted to rewrite their life story today?
I think the best advice is advice I got from my driver's education teacher when I was 15 years old. Stay in your lane. Do what you have control over. Do what you can do.
Yeah.
Stop worrying about trying to have control over another person's life. Who are you going to be? Who will you be today? And what kind of person are you going to be? As we practice love, it knits it strengthens the fabric of our character. that fabric of our character will become so strong that people will feel that love that we send out in a genuine way every single day. That's the advice I'd give. Decide what fabric of a character that you want and stay in your lane.
Absolutely. Well, Paul, if you were to go back and rewrite your own life story today, what would that look like?
I've thought about it quite a bit. There was it's probably been 20 years ago. I was a candy vendor, and had a route that I drove. And so I was getting up before dawn and I was coming home after dark. And so I would see the sunrise and I would see the sunset. You'll see this picture right here that I've got behind me. This picture is just something I had an epiphany after 6 months of doing that, of driving and having all that windshield time driving for that route. I realized that, the very best sunrises and the very best sunsets all have clouds. Everybody in their life is going to have these problems. Everybody in their life is going to go through these dark spots. When they get out of that dark spot, they'll look back and say, now I see the silver lining in that cloud. Now I see the beauty of that sunset on that chapter of my life. Now I see the beauty of the sunrise on the future chapter. And I wouldn't change a thing. Absolutely would not change a thing. I've learned so much from going the whole spectrum of anger now to love that I know what anger is all about. I don't have to go there anymore. I've been there before. I don't want to be there. This is a better life, and I wouldn't change a thing having that knowledge. And the knowledge base that angry culture gave me is a force within me that it motivates me to send out love every single day. There's too much anger out there, so much rage. We got to stop it.
Absolutely.
Paul, thank you for being on our show today. I've learned so much, and I'm sure you have, Sharlene.
Absolutely.
And if you want to know more about Paul and his work, head over to his website, theroleoflove.com, where you can get his book, you can get the game, and you can get a reflective journal as you practice what he does. But we'll also put a link in the show notes. Paul, again, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen and Sharlene. It's been such a pleasure to be with you today. Thanks for laughing at my jokes.
Thank you for joining us on the Rewrite Your Story podcast.
We hope you found this episode enlightening.
For more information on the topics discussed, please visit our website at stephenandsharlene.com.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform, share it with your friends, and follow us on social media at Stephen and Sharlene.
Until next time, stay informed and inspired.
This is Stephen and Sharlene signing off from the Rewrite Your Story podcast. Thank you and stay blessed.